Hello. Can everybody hear me okay? Sounds like it's on. Good. Cool. Oh, we've missed a slide. There we go. Ah, cool. So who am I? My name is Sally. I am an iOS developer. I'm currently head of app development at Dennis Publishing, which means I spend a lot of time making newsstand apps. And what I'm going to cover today is disability and accessibility, what they mean, as well as what we have on iOS for accessibility, how to add support, and finally how to test it. So there's currently more than 1 billion people in the world today that have some form of disability, and that's roughly 1 in 7 people. And it's a growing population, because more people are living longer, and the longer you live, generally, the more likely you are to have a disability. Slow animations. Cool. So yeah, so having a disability can make life extremely difficult. Even just basic things can become whole, planning them out in weeks in advance. But we can use technology to overcome some of these challenges. So there's this really amazing project. There's this team of people who are basically making a very low-cost solution to doing eye tracking software, so people can draw just using their eyes. And there was this guy who was diagnosed with ALS, which has left him completely paralyzed, except for his eyes. And he was a graffiti artist before. And it's basically, they've done this really amazing thing where he can draw, and they've actually projected it up on buildings for him. So what are some things that we can do in iOS to kind of do more for accessibility? So how do people with vision problems use an iOS device? Well, they mostly use VoiceOver on iOS and OS X, and also on the iPod Shuffle back in the day. And VoiceOver is a screen reading technology. So it replicates the UI for people who can't see it. So basically, this is what it would kind of look like, if you imagine. So mail, one new item, double tap to open. And it speaks an astounding 36 languages, which is about 34 more than I do. So using VoiceOver, so I'm just going to switch to actually demoing on the phone, hopefully. Yay, phone. Ooh, that looks cool. Sorry? It's not meant to look like that, no? I'm not very hopeful about that. Yes, the new iOS 8, it's completely blue. Well, okay. We could probably start. Is it kind of legible from there? Yeah? Okay. So basically, to turn VoiceOver on, in case you've never done it, you go into Settings, into General, and then they've actually moved it fairly near the top now. Got accessibility. So to turn VoiceOver on, just go in.
VoiceOver on.
VoiceOver on. Woo. So it's quite easy. You can see it kind of draws. Can you see? Yeah. It's drawn a shape around basically the current element that it's looking at. And you can navigate kind of 2 different ways. You can either just kind of tap on the screen.
Double tap to activate the selected item.
Or you can actually
swipe
just
free
swipe
VoiceOver.
to
Speak,
like
use compact voice. Use sound, speak, VoiceOver practice.
You can also scroll by using 3 fingers, just kind of
row
up and
6
down.
to 15 of 15. Rows 1 to 7 of 15.
Quite cool. Yay! It's pretty again. Cool. And then, and then to actually select something, you just double tap. So
double mail. 15. Mail. Compose. Button.
Make a new email.
Text field.
Message body. One of the really cool things that they added in iOS 7 is actually something called handwriting.
Handwriting.
So you can
lowercase.
Basically just by drawing on the phone.
H. Message body. E. Message body L. Message body L. Message body O. Message body below. Text field.
That's pretty awesome. Yeah, but it's only in iOS 7 with VoiceOver, sadly. So yeah, so you can turn the phone off now. Going back to the slides. Cool. So, it's very noisy VoiceOver. Cool. Let me turn that off. Actually.
Alert. Accept selected. VoiceOver off.
Cool. Easy. Cool. So along with VoiceOver, people also use Braille displays. So I don't know how many of you know about these, but they're very cool, and it's actually like refreshable dynamic Braille. So it takes the output of VoiceOver and actually makes the Braille kind of letters. And you can also get Braille keyboards that have kind of that bottom row are all refreshable Braille cells. So they can enter in text way faster than kind of tapping on the keyboard or using the handwriting. And that's really pretty amazing, because they've made something that you would think would be completely inaccessible, because it's a touch screen that you actually have to see. And they've made it completely accessible. So I'm going to switch back to the phone again and kind of just show some examples of, first, an app that is accessible and one that isn't. So let's turn
VoiceOver on.
Cool.
Calculator.
So
Double tap to
some
open.
maths. Who likes math?
Calculator. Result.
Nobody?
0. All clear.
So
plus, minus.
I can just kind of
5.
say, yeah, I want to do.
Multiply.
Oh yeah, I
5.
have to double tap to select.
5.
5
Multiply.
times.
Multiply. 3. 3 equals. Result.
15. In case you didn't know that.
Tweetbot notification.
Cool.
Tweetbot. Add not Josh, follow that Calculator.
So I
Settings.
definitely forgot to put Do Not Disturb mode
Settings.
on, didn't I?
Voice.
Let's turn that off.
Accessibility. Automatically speak or general. General. Settings. Back.
This has been
Rows 8
fun.
to 18 of 18.
Where is it? Oh,
Settings.
there it is.
Head
Do not
AirPlay
disturb.
Wi-Fi. Blue mode per cap. Note controls. Do not disturb. Do not disturb. Manual. Off. On.
Cool. Now.
Home. Settings. Tweetbot notification.
Oh, what?
Tweetbot notification. Tweetbot.
Right.
Tweetbot notification. Tweetbot. Calculator. Double tap to open. Flappy
That's
Bird.
very frustrating. Okay.
Double tap
Anyway.
to open.
On to my absolute
Tweetbot
favorite
notification.
app.
Tweetbot. Add upload and follow that
Guys are
most.
funny.
Tweetbot notification. Tweetbot. Tweetbot notification. Tweetbot notification.
Okay. Seriously. Let's turn off VoiceOver.
Tweetbot. Alert.
For a
Accessibility. Access selected. VoiceOver off.
Okay. Seriously. How is that still working? All the way down? Where? Always. Always. There we go. No? It turned it off. Weird. Okay. So now you can all stop following me. It's fine.
VoiceOver on. Calculate
So
Flappy Bird.
Flappy Bird. Who has Flappy
Double tap
Bird
to
or
open.
had it at one point? It was pretty cool, right? Let's see how well this works
Flappy
with
Bird.
VoiceOver.
Welcome back. Most it.
Cool. So now, let's see. I can't. I'm actually pressing things
British.
and nothing's happening. So that's not very good, is it? And actually, I think when I'm connected to a network and the ads show up, it actually just starts reading out the advertiser ID. It just goes like 5817722. So clearly that's not a good thing to happen. So can I
Flappy
switch back
Bird.
to the slides? Thanks.
Double tap to open. Selected. VoiceOver off.
Cool. Okay. It's never good to do live demos. So I'm going to go through 4 kind of quick basic things with accessibility. So the first one is accessibility label. And this basically identifies the element. And if you're using UIKit, it defaults to using the title. But if you're doing like an image-based kind of thing, then you won't get anything. So you should definitely try to specify this. But you don't need to actually include the control type. So if it's like a play button, just call it play, send. Or if it's something like a text field, just first name. And accessibility traits as well. So these, basically, it's a combination of traits that characterize what the element is. And again, if you're using UIKit, UIKit is awesome and generally tries to be accessible. It will use standard traits. But you can also combine traits. So if you're doing something like you have a button that causes a page to turn, you just include both traits. And then this is a list of all the traits. As of iOS 7, most of them you had in 6 as well, but kind of before that, some of them are missing. So if for whatever reason you're supporting things like iOS 3 or 4, be careful. And then accessibility value. So this is where you'd be using, you have a static value, but a dynamic label. Say something like a text field or an on-off button, where you'd need to kind of say what the actual value of it is as well. And finally, accessibility hint. So this describes the outcome of what happens if you perform an action. Keep it really, really brief, though, kind of only a couple words. Definitely start with a verb that describes the result, and just make sure you don't make it sound like a command. So sends the message, purchases 1 month subscription, plays the song. Cool. So how do we do this awesome stuff? If you live in the land of zibs and storyboards, it's very, very easy. You just need to enable accessibility and then fill out the label and the hints and the traits. Awesome. If you're doing stuff programmatically, it's a little bit more work, and this all really applies to UIKit. If you're using kind of OpenGL or anything like that, it's a little bit trickier. So basically, yeah, if you've got static accessibility kind of text, like the label and the value, then just use the setters. But if it's something that's going to change over time, you actually need to override the methods. So you'd override accessibility label, accessibility hint, etc. Yeah, but it's pretty easy in the grand scheme of APIs, and you can do quite cool things like find out if VoiceOver is on, because you might want to be able to handle things differently in your app if it's on. You can also move VoiceOver focus. So VoiceOver by default goes from, actually I'll do this the other way so it makes sense to you guys. It starts in the top left and goes to the bottom right. So if you tapped on something and it pushed a new view on, it would immediately actually call out the back button, which isn't really great. So you'd probably want it to actually say what the heading is or something else, like what the current weather is. I think that's what the weather app does. So it's a really important thing to do. And then direct interaction. So this would possibly, I don't actually know how clear was written, but this would be kind of one of the ways you could make clear accessible, is enabling direct interaction. So direct interaction takes away that whole layer of VoiceOver basically absorbing all the gestures that a user does so that they can just interact with it the way they would if VoiceOver was off. And all it is a trait, so it's quite easy. And there's loads of different accessibility notifications that you can post and observe. So if things change, if the page scrolls, you can do all sorts of things to make it a really customized experience. You can also find out when VoiceOver is finished speaking. So if you were doing a magazine app, possibly, and you wanted it got to the end of that block of text, and you wanted it to just automatically scroll to the next page and start reading, you'd listen out for the announcement did finish notification, and then check if it was successful or not, and then scroll the page and go again. So magic tab. I should have put like a magic wand and stars and all sorts of things, but it seemed a bit cheesy. But this is really cool. This was introduced in iOS 6, and iOS 6 was actually kind of cool for VoiceOver and accessibility in general, because it was the first one where they really kind of went, oh, hey, developers, here, you can do some cool things now. Before it was kind of lame. So Magic Tap is one of the things where it's a two-finger double tap, and you can basically do whatever you want with it. So you should obviously not do anything weird like, I don't know, buy things with it. Yeah, triggering purchases, that would be cool. But yeah, you can attach it to pretty much any object, so you can have it do different things depending where the user is in the app. Some of the stuff that Apple does with it is if you're in the phone app and you're on a call and you do the Magic Tap, it actually ends the current call. So it's just stuff like that where it's like shortcuts, things that they'd probably want to be doing in the context of that situation. And then there's also, you can kind of go back to the previous view. So again, if you're using something where you've pushed the view on, you'd get a back button. But if you're doing something custom and you don't have that back button, you'd want to put this in and perform escape gesture, which is you just kind of take two fingers and scrub and it goes back, which is quite cool. But so yeah, you can again kind of customize it. So if you're not using UIKit and you're using something like OpenGL or DrawPoint or something else that's far too complicated, don't worry, it's still possible. You can still make your app accessible. It's a little bit more work, but it's not that bad. I don't really have time to go through all of kind of implementing the UI accessibility container protocol, but there is some really, really good sample code from last year's WWDC, which kind of goes through all of it. And it's quite easy. I mean, basically, you just need to say, hey, this is an accessibility element. These are the same kind of thing, traits, hints, labels. But then you also just need to say where it is on the screen. So not bad. So testing VoiceOver. So you've implemented all these really amazing things, and now you want to make sure it actually works. And the first step is having a plan. So it's never a good idea just to kind of turn VoiceOver on and just start pecking at the screen and go, yeah, that button says the right thing, that button says the right thing, it's accessible. The best thing to do really is to try to go through things that your user would do. So if you have anything like test plans, user stories, use cases, requirements, anything, you'd go through some of those things. And if you don't have anything like that, you probably should. It generally helps. But you'd test cases like I can purchase a train ticket or I can reply to a message. So one of the ways you can start testing is in the simulator. Sadly, it doesn't talk to you. So if you're feeling lonely, don't use the accessibility inspector. But yeah, it'll basically show you, it just pops up and says, this is what the label is, this is what the traits are, this is what the frame is, and it also lets you know when there's notifications. So it's quite a cool thing, but it doesn't really give you a full experience. That's when you need to use the device. And yeah, so this is where you really get to kind of experience, is my app working? So there is an accessibility shortcut where you can triple tap the home button to turn VoiceOver on, and then if you triple tap it again, it turns it off. So that's quite a good one. And then screen curtain. This is a fun way to freak people out. If you three-finger triple tap on the screen while VoiceOver is on, the screen goes completely dark. So it's really good for testing because you can't cheat. You have to make sure like your app is properly accessible, or else you're kind of stuck until you do it. But if you forget it, then you're kind of stuck. But you can turn VoiceOver off and it disables screen curtain. So. But yeah, I mean, the most important part of testing is trying to get some user testing done. So Apple Viz has some great forums, and there's always people on there that are completely up for doing user testing. And they have lots of resources on kind of how to add things, and they're always super excited about stuff, as well as Mac accessibility. The WWC labs, I don't know if they did it last year or the year before, they actually brought in a group of blind users, and you could actually have your app tested right then and there, which was very cool. And there'll also be some accessibility labs at UIKonf, I think. Yes? Yes, there'll be accessibility labs at UIKonf if you happen to be in San Francisco in a few weeks. Also, reach out to charities, local councils if you have them, and any support groups. They're always super happy to help. So physical and motor skills, how does somebody with limited skills actually use an iOS device? Well, Apple's done something called assistive touch, which is great for people who have difficulties actually pressing hardware buttons or doing multi-touch gestures. If any of you had an iPhone 4 or 4S and the home button stopped working, you've probably used assistive touch. It's quite cool. And then in iOS 7, like this has to be the best feature of iOS 7, switch control. You can control your whole phone with a switch. How awesome is that? You can also set up multiple switches if you want to get really elaborate. But yeah, so we're going to quickly do a demo on how to set up switch control. So, hey, cool. So we're going to go into general and accessibility, and then all the way down at the bottom we've got physical and motor. And if we go into switch control, we don't need to turn it on yet because we need to add a switch. So we'll add a new switch. You can use external switches, so those are all connect via Bluetooth. You can use the screen, which is what we're going to do in a second, but you can also use the camera. So this is quite cool, where you can actually tell it to use, like if I do my head to the left, it'll actually use that as a switch to control the phone. But for now, we'll do the screen, because it's really, I don't want to stand up here going like this. So yeah, so we'll just select item. So now we've got a switch. Now I'm going to turn switch control on. How cool. Isn't that awesome? I think it's awesome. Okay, so the kind of red outline it's what's called the cursor. And then when you tap on something, it selects it. If I tap correctly, there we go. Cool. And then it basically iterates through all the things in that group. And then when you get the dotted line, that gives you a chance to actually back out. So let's see how it works in Calculator. More maths. I tapped too quickly. Cool. Calculator. 15. So yeah, it's kind of sad that it doesn't talk to you. I'd like it to talk to me. So 58. Ooh. Let's divide that by any number. Anybody have a number they want to divide 58 by? 0? Woo! Cool. So switch control works for that. Awesome. So let's have a look at our. Oh, I did it again. Let's have a look at my favorite app, Flappy Bird, which you'd think could be quite accessible because all it really is you're just tapping on the screen. So it would be perfect, right, for using a switch. So switch control has no idea what's going on right now, and it's entered what I like to call Cylon mode, where you get that kind of back and forth thing. And it's basically so you can tell it exactly where to target. So it's quite cool, right? So I've pressed the play button. Awesome. Yeah, let's go. I'm going to tap the screen. Yep, I've tapped. Ah! Done. So that's not terribly good. So can I? So yeah. So adding support for switch control. Well, sadly, there is no documentation, at least that I could find, and I did look, on how to support switch control. I've actually never heard anybody at Apple talk about how you add support, so I'm pretty sure they're doing it 100% on their own, which is cool. And I did some testing, and basically, when you're in UIKit, anytime there's something that you can actually tap on, switch control goes, oh yeah, cool, I'll highlight that. Even if it's just a view with a tap gesture recognizer, it still finds it, so that's quite cool. But if you do find yourself in a situation where switch control is difficult to use, you could obviously change around the UI a bit to try to make it easier, but that's about it. Maybe iOS 8? Maybe? I don't know. So yeah, so with testing switch control, the only way you can do it is on a device. And you've seen how easy it is to add a switch, or you can use your head if you want to look crazy on the train. I don't think it works very well, though, on the train, because it has to be very still. But yeah, and again, user testing is a really important one to do. So in learning difficulties, oh, I definitely need some water. How does somebody with learning difficulties use an iOS device? So we've got something called guided access, and it helps people with autism or other kind of attention and sensory challenges to stay focused on one thing. So you can it disables the home button and things like that. And you can also selectively disable different buttons if you don't want them to buy Smurf berries or something. You can just take all of that out. And you can actually also add support yourself. There's a UI guided access restriction delegate, and you can disable certain fields and buttons automatically. So all of that's quite easy, but why should you add accessibility support? Well, you can hugely improve someone's life. I mean, completely dramatically change it. And they will be so much happier for it. And who here actually wants more users on their apps? Is there anybody that doesn't want more users? No. So I mean, it's not a small chunk of people. It's a large group of people. And when you do it, you get such great feedback from people. They're always just so excited about it. Also, because you can do it, I'm assuming you're all very smart people. It's not necessarily easy doing programming. And you all have the tools and the ability. And really, as developers, it's up to you to add accessibility support, because the questions around adding accessibility to Clear, the designers can do whatever they want. Really, it is down to you guys as developers to make it work, because you completely have all the ability to do it. This is one of my favorite quotes by Tim Cook. It's one of the few times he's gotten angry, apparently, in public at least, which is, yeah, when we work on making our devices accessible by the blind, I don't consider the bloody ROI. And so for Apple, this isn't about money. This is their passion. This is part of their core values. And you're writing apps for that platform, you should probably make sure you do it. And they also generally feature people if you do it, which is always nice. And accessibility is for everyone. Things like Siri and dictation and voice control are all actually listed under accessibility features, even though everybody uses them, but they're really powerful. So how many apps are there that are accessible? Out of everybody here, who has an app that they know is 100% accessible with VoiceOver? Right, that's maybe 5 or 6 people, which is good, awesome, yay. But it's not that many people. And there's just no stats on how many apps are completely accessible, but we know it's not everything, or else I wouldn't be here. So what can we do to improve this? If you have any open source code, add support, and then also include some instructions if there's anything that people still need to do. If you use any open source code, do a pull request. Well, do the actual stuff and then do the pull request. That helps. Try thinking about accessibility from the start. Don't just kind of go, oh yeah, we need to do this probably. Because you might actually run into situations where the design that you're doing is if you can't figure out how to describe a button and what the button does, then maybe it's a bad button. So you can actually improve the UX of your app. And don't put accessibility in the backlog. Would you ship an app that looks like this? I mean, this is what an app, pretty much would look like, well, if you were shipping iOS 6 apps still. To somebody who, is using VoiceOver, if half the stuff is missing, that's just bad. And talk about it more. So if you're adding support and you do something really great, tweet about it, blog about it, make it part of your coding standard. And then get involved with charities, councils, groups. They're always really excited to find out developers care. And don't assume something actually already exists as a solution. There's tons of things that aren't being done yet. And some of the stuff that does exist is horrendously expensive. So what are some of the things that are being done currently on iOS, kind of outside of just making things VoiceOver compatible? I don't know if, I'm sure some of you have probably heard of Proloquo to Go, which is in the App Store for an astounding $219. Who would like to be charging that much for their apps? That would be nice. But it's basically a symbol support communication app where people can just tap on buttons to communicate. There's Ingenie, which is basically a lot of games for children with cognitive language and fine motor delays to try to help improve that. And there's TouchTalk. TouchTalk was the first app that I wrote way, way back in the day. And it was written specifically for deafblind users. And deafblind people have what's called the deafblind manual alphabet, where they can kind of basically do different gestures and stuff on a hand to communicate. And I did a modified version of that alphabet in gestures so that they can just kind of do gestures on the phone and communicate using just that. So it's not difficult. There's loads of things still to do. And what are some of the things that you can do? Well, first off, spend a whole day just using VoiceOver or switch control and properly put screen curtain on and really have a go at it. You will be so frustrated. And then you'll realize that you really do need to add accessibility support. I personally don't like running. And I've never understood the whole sponsoring people for marathons and stuff, but you could run an accessibility marathon and get people to sponsor you and spend a day just kind of adding support, and then at the end of it, donate money to proceeds after you've bought a pizza, maybe. And take one weekend and do something with accessibility. So if you have a hack day coming up, go into it with mind that you're going to do something with accessibility. So I did a hackathon about a year ago, and Sphero was one of the sponsors. And so I actually did something where you could move the Sphero, and it used the accelerometer data, and it converted that to text. It was quite cool. And yeah, I'm a big fan of hack days and hackathons, so most things are about that. But yeah, talk to local charities or support groups or anybody and try to run a hackathon with them. Even if you only get a few developers involved, you don't know, you might build something just absolutely amazing. Cool. So hopefully you guys have a better understanding of what accessibility can do on iOS. There's some resources. So if you want to test, if you want to know more about testing accessibility, I don't have short links, but most of them are quite easy to find. And yeah, the sample code for doing things if you're using OpenGL or something is up there, and then the greater accessibility programming guide. And yeah, the HIGs are also really good. They have lots in there. So that's it. Yeah.